Elon Musk's reaction to a poor girl's homemade robot for a job will leave you speechless. The acrid smell of burning plastic filled Valentina Garcia's lungs as she sprinted through the junkyard, her worn sneakers kicking up dust in the pre-dawn light. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but she couldn't stop, not when she was this close. There, beneath a mountain of discarded electronics, she'd spotted it. A barely damaged circuit board from a Tesla Model 3, exactly what she needed to complete her robot. Oye, ladrona. The security guard's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, dancing across the piles of scrap metal. Valentina ducked behind a rusted car chassis, pressing her hand against her mouth to quiet her breathing. The servo motors she'd salvaged clinked softly in her backpack, betraying her position. "Please," she whispered to herself. "Just 5 more minutes." Her fingers brushed against the acceptance letter in her pocket, the one inviting her to present her invention at Tesla's Innovation Showcase. After 6 rejection letters, this was her chance, her only chance. The guard's footsteps crunched closer. Valentina's mind raced to her mother, who'd been taking extra night shifts at the hospital just to keep the electricity on, and to her father, whose factory injury had left them drowning in medical bills. They didn't know she was here. They thought she was at the library, studying like the good daughter they'd raised. A sudden crash echoed through the junkyard as something toppled in the distance. The guard turned, his flashlight beam swinging away. Valentina seized her moment. She darted forward, snatched the circuit board, and ran. Her lungs burned, and the sharp edges of salvaged parts dug into her back through the thin fabric of her backpack. 3 days. She had 3 days until the showcase, where Elon Musk himself would be present. 3 days to transform a pile of discarded dreams into something that could change her family's life forever. The same words that had driven her here echoed in her mind. Sometimes the only difference between impossible and possible is someone brave enough to try. As she cleared the fence and disappeared into the shadows of her working-class neighborhood, Valentina couldn't help but smile. In her garage waited a half-finished robot, built from society's throwaways, just like her dreams had been. But she was about to prove that sometimes the most remarkable innovations come from those with nothing left to lose. The Garcia family's apartment sat on the 4th floor of a weathered building in East Los Angeles, where the constant hum of traffic mixed with the rattling of an ancient air conditioning unit that worked only when it chose to. Valentina slipped through the front door at 5 a.m., careful not to wake her parents. But her mother, Elena, was already up, her hospital janitor's uniform crisp despite the early hour. "Mija?" Elena's voice was soft but carried a weight Valentina knew too well. "The library doesn't open until 7. Valentina's hands tightened around her backpack straps. The salvaged parts inside felt suddenly heavier. "Mama, Show me your hands." It wasn't a request. Valentina extended her hands, revealing fresh cuts and grease stains. Elena sighed, retrieving the first aid kit they kept above the sink, the same one she'd brought home from the hospital when budget cuts had meant layoffs instead of raises. As Elena cleaned her daughter's wounds, her hands gentle despite their roughness from years of harsh cleaning chemicals, she spoke. "Your father and I didn't cross the border 20 years ago for you to become a scavenger, Vale. And I didn't learn English watching YouTube repair videos to spend my life cleaning floors," Valentina replied, immediately regretting her words as hurt flashed across her mother's face. "Lo siento, Mama. I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant," Elena's voice softened. "But this robot obsession, since your father's accident—" "It's not an obsession," Valentina interrupted, pulling the Tesla invitation from her pocket. "It's our future. Look." Elena's eyes widened as she read the letter. Her English wasn't perfect, but words like Tesla and Elon Musk needed no translation. "This is real? As real as Papa's medical bills." Valentina gestured to the stack of envelopes on their small kitchen table, each marked with threatening red stamps. "One presentation, Mama. If they like my robot, they'll offer me a job. Real money, health insurance." She swallowed hard. "No more night shifts for you. No more watching Papa count pills to make his prescription last longer. From the bedroom, they heard the familiar sound of their ancient window fans struggling against the morning heat. Through the thin walls came the muffled coughing of Valentina's father, Roberto, once the strongest man she knew. Before the factory accident that crushed his lungs with chemical fumes, he'd been the one who first taught her to take things apart and put them back together. "Your father still blames himself," Elena said quietly, "for not being able to send you to college like your cousins in Phoenix." Valentina thought of her cousins with their university degrees and corporate jobs, who looked at her with a mixture of pity and embarrassment at family gatherings. They'd stopped inviting the Garcias to visit after Roberto's accident, as if poverty might be contagious. "College doesn't teach what I know, Mama." Valentina opened her backpack, carefully laying out her salvaged treasures. "Look, this circuit board? It's worth more than I'd make in 2 months at the corner store, and I learned how to repair it from free online classes using the computer at the biblioteca." Elena touched the circuit board gently, as if it might break. "And this will help your robot sort the recyclables, like you showed me?" Valentina nodded eagerly. "But better, much better. The prototype I showed them in the video application was just the beginning, with these parts." She gestured to her salvaged collection. "I can make it sort faster, more efficiently. Maybe even help it learn to identify contaminated materials." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Like the ones that hurt your father?" "Exactly like those." Valentina squared her shoulders. No one else should have to choose between feeding their family and breathing clean air. Valentina's workshop was a converted parking space behind their apartment building, a space she'd earned by fixing the landlord's ancient washing machines. The morning sun filtered through a plastic tarp roof, casting blue-tinted shadows over her workbench. A discarded door balanced on milk crates. In the corner, her robot waited, its exposed circuitry glinting in the early light. "Buenos dias, Esperanza," she whispered to the robot. She'd named it after her grandmother, who'd always said that hope was the last thing the poor could afford to lose. Right now, Esperanza the robot looked more like a collection of dreams held together with duct tape and wire than a Tesla-worthy invention. Valentina pulled up her latest tutorial video on her cracked phone screen, propping it against a jar of salvaged screws. The phone, like everything else in her life, was second-hand, its battery held in place with a rubber band. She'd learned to code on this same phone, typing complex algorithms with her thumbs during bus rides to her weekend job at the corner store. If you are enjoying the story till now, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It costs you nothing, but for us, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue. A sharp knock interrupted her concentration. "Valentina? Estas aquí?" It was Mrs. Rodriguez from upstairs, clutching a paper bag. The old woman had been bringing Valentina breakfast ever since catching her dumpster diving for electronics 3 months ago. "Gracias, Mrs. Rodriguez, but I'm not hungry. Nonsense." The old woman set down the bag, revealing warm tortillas and eggs. "You can't build the future on an empty stomach, mijita." As if on cue, Valentina's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch, saving her store wages for parts. Mrs. Rodriguez watched her eat with grandmotherly satisfaction, then peered at the robot. "She's growing," the old woman observed, "like a metal granddaughter." Valentina smiled around a mouthful of tortilla. "I got the new circuit board. Now I just need to—" She stopped as heavy footsteps approached. Jorge, the landlord's son, appeared in the doorway, his face twisted in its usual sneer. "Still playing with trash, Garcia?" He kicked an empty cardboard box. "Dad says this isn't a dump. Clean it up or find somewhere else to store your basura." Mrs. Rodriguez straightened, her small frame somehow filling the space. "Jorge Martinez, your father promised this girl this space after she fixed—" "Things change, vieja." He smirked. "Besides, some real tenants might want to park here. People with real cars, not robot fantasies." After they left, Jorge with his threats, Mrs. Rodriguez with her muttered curses, Valentina stared at her workspace. 3 days. She had 3 days to transform this basura into something that would impress one of the world's most innovative companies. The pressure sat on her chest like a concrete block. Her phone buzzed. A message from her cousin Marcos in Phoenix. "Heard about your Tesla thing. Don't embarrass the family when they reject you. Cashier jobs are always hiring." Valentina's hands shook as she deleted the message. She turned to her robot, determination hardening her features. "Ready for your upgrade, Esperanza?" For the next 12 hours, she worked. Her fingers flew across salvaged keyboards, debugging code she'd learned from free online courses. When the library's public computer time limit expired, she'd memorized entire programming sequences, typing them out on her phone during her bus ride home. The sun was setting when she hit her first major obstacle. The new circuit board, her pre-dawn treasure, wasn't compatible with Esperanza's main processor. The robot's sorting arm twitched and froze, smoking slightly. "No! No! No!" Valentina's cry echoed off the concrete walls. She'd risked everything for this part, and now… A cough from the doorway made her jump. Her father stood there leaning heavily on his cane, his work-worn face etched with concern. "Mija, your mother said I'd find you here." "Papa, you shouldn't be up." The stairs to her workshop were steep, and his breathing was already labored. Roberto Garcia eased himself onto a stack of flattened boxes. "I heard you got into some trouble this morning. The junkyard?" Valentina's silence was answer enough. "Bring it here," he said, gesturing to the smoking circuit board. "Let your old man see." Before his accident, Roberto had been the best maintenance worker at the factory. His hands, though shaking now from medication, still held the memory of 30 years of mechanical work. "Ah," he said after examining the board, "the voltage is wrong. But maybe…" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in oil-stained paper. "I was saving this for your birthday." Inside was a voltage regulator, new, still in its packaging. Valentina's eyes widened. "Papa, how did you…" "Some of my old factory friends still remember me." He pressed the component into her hands. "They save things for me sometimes. Clean parts, safe parts." His eyes clouded. "Not like the ones that…" He trailed off, his breathing becoming labored. As dawn broke 2 days before the presentation, Valentina's workspace became a battlefield of frustration. Despite her father's voltage regulator, Esperanza's systems weren't cooperating. The robot's sorting accuracy had dropped to 65%, nowhere near the precision needed to impress Tesla. Empty energy drink cans littered her workbench, testament to another sleepless night. Damn it! She slammed her fist on the bench as the robot misidentified a plastic bottle as organic waste for the 3rd time. The sound echoed through the early morning quiet, followed by an ominous crack from above. Water began dripping through her tarp roof, threatening her exposed electronics. Her phone buzzed, a reminder for her shift at the corner store. She couldn't afford to miss it. Her last paycheck had gone entirely to parts. But the presentation was in 2 days, and Esperanza was still failing. The weight of her family's hopes pressed down harder than the gathering storm clouds. "Valentina?" Her mother's voice carried down from their apartment window. "Your uniform is clean for work." "I can't, Mama. Not today. The robot…" "Bills don't pay themselves, mija." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "Mr. Kim needs you at the store." Valentina looked at her robot, then at the growing puddle on her workbench. "Just let me fix this leak first." But as she climbed the rickety ladder to patch the tarp, disaster struck. Her foot slipped on the wet rung, sending her crashing into her workbench. Esperanza toppled, hitting the concrete with a sound that made Valentina's heart stop. "Dios mío!" Elena's scream pierced the morning air. She rushed down the stairs, still in her cleaning uniform. "Estás bien? Are you hurt?" Valentina barely felt the scrapes on her arms. She was too busy staring at Esperanza's shattered frame. The main processor board, her prize from the junkyard, had cracked clean through. "It's over," she whispered, picking up the pieces with trembling hands. "Everything. It's all been for nothing." Elena knelt beside her daughter, heedless of the puddles soaking her uniform. "Nothing is over until you stop trying, mi amor. Your father taught you that. This isn't like fixing a broken radio, Mama. This was my one chance to change everything, to help Papa, to give you better than—" She gestured at her mother's cleaning uniform, then immediately regretted it as hurt flashed across Elena's face. "Better than what? Better than honest work?" Elena stood, her voice sharp. "You think I'm ashamed of cleaning floors, of doing what I must for my family? No, Then do what you must. Go to work, earn your pay, and then—" Elena's expression softened. "Then, we will find a way. We always do." At the corner store, Valentina moved through her shift like a ghost, mechanically restocking shelves while her mind raced through possible solutions. Mr. Kim, the elderly owner, watched her with concern. "Bad day?" he asked during her break, sliding her a cup of instant coffee. "My robot." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Ah, the famous robot." Mr. Kim nodded. He'd heard all about it during her previous shifts. "The one for the big company." "It broke, and I can't." She swallowed hard. "The parts I need, they're too expensive. I'd need at least $300, and the presentation is in 2 days." Mr. Kim was quiet for a long moment. Then he disappeared into his back office, returning with a small envelope. "My wife, before she passed, she always said education is the best investment." Inside the envelope was $200 in small bills, probably the store's emergency fund. Valentina's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Kim, I can't." "You can, and you will." He pressed the envelope into her hands. "But you work double shifts next week to pay it back, yes." By the time her shift ended, word had spread through the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting at her workspace with a small jar of saved coins. The mechanic down the street contributed a barely used multimeter. Even Jorge, the landlord's son, grudgingly offered a newer tarp for her roof, muttering something about not wanting water damage to the building. But it was the arrival of Mr. Ortiz, her father's old co-worker, that changed everything. He came limping down the alley carrying a battered toolbox. "Roberto called," he said simply. "Said his girl needed help with electronics." Valentina recognized him. He'd been in the factory the day of her father's accident. He'd been the one who pulled Roberto from the chemical spill, inhaling fumes that left him with his own chronic cough. "I was the factory's electrical specialist for 20 years, he said, opening his toolbox to reveal pristine tools and components. "Before the accident. Before they replaced us with machines that didn't complain about safety violations." His eyes fixed on Esperanza's broken frame. "You're building something that can identify harmful materials, yes? Something that could prevent what happened to your father?" Valentina nodded, throat tight. "Then let an old electrician help. Show me what you've got." For the next several hours, Valentina worked alongside Mr. Ortiz, their hands moving in tandem as they rebuilt Esperanza's circuitry. He taught her tricks no YouTube video had ever mentioned, shortcuts learned from decades of real-world experience. When something wouldn't work, he'd pause, think, then suggest a workaround that seemed like magic. "The problem with engineers from fancy schools," he said, as they soldered a particularly delicate connection, "is they only know the right way to do things. But sometimes, mija, the right way isn't the only way." The night before the presentation, Valentina's workspace hummed with nervous energy. Esperanza stood rebuilt, stronger than before, her new parts gleaming under the replacement tarp. The robot's sorting accuracy had improved to 98.7%, thanks to Mr. Ortiz's expertise and the community's contributions. But Valentina's stomach churned with anxiety. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered to herself, running another diagnostic test. "What if they see right through me?" Her phone lit up with a notification. Another message from her cousin in Phoenix. Saw Tesla's stock price hit record highs. Hope you got a backup plan when they laugh you out." Valentina's hands clenched into fists. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. She turned to find Jorge, the landlord's son, shifting uncomfortably. "My father," he began, then stopped. "He wants to know if you need a ride tomorrow. To the Tesla thing. He says the bus isn't reliable, and—" Jorge looked away. "Look, I'm sorry about before. About calling your work basura." Before Valentina could respond, her father's voice came from the darkness. "She already has a ride." Roberto Garcia emerged from the shadows, walking straighter than she'd seen in months. In his hand were keys to their old Ford pickup, the one that had sat unused since his accident, too expensive to maintain. "Papa, no, the truck's registration, the gas, is taken care of." Elena appeared beside him, holding up an envelope. The whole building pitched in. Mrs. Rodriguez sold her gold crucifix. Mr. Kim added yesterday's register. Even Jorge's father. Jorge shuffled his feet. "Yeah. Well, can't have someone from our building showing up in a bus, right?" Valentina's vision blurred with tears. Her mother stepped forward, holding something else. A dress, simple but new, the price tag still attached. "I've been saving," Elena said softly. 3 months of extra night shifts. A girl presenting to Tesla should look the part, no? The dress was navy blue, professional but practical. Valentina touched it reverently, then noticed something else in her mother's hands, a small jewelry box. "Your grandmother's earrings," Elena explained, opening the box to reveal small silver hoops. "She wore them the day she crossed the border, carrying nothing but hope and dreams for her children. Now they're yours." The weight of their sacrifices pressed against Valentina's chest. What if I fail? What if all of this, everyone's help, their money, their faith in me, what if it's all for nothing? Mr. Ortiz, who had been quietly adjusting Esperanza's sensors, spoke up. "The day of your father's accident, I had a choice. The chemicals were spreading, the alarms were blaring, and protocol said to wait for emergency response." He paused, his voice rough. "But I went in anyway, because sometimes you have to risk everything for what matters." "And I lived," Roberto added, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, "because someone believed that trying and failing was better than not trying at all." As if in response, Esperanza's system suddenly lit up, running through her sorting protocols perfectly. The robot's arm moved with fluid precision, separating materials faster than ever before. "Mira," Elena breathed. "She's dancing." Indeed, there was something almost graceful about the way Esperanza moved now, her mechanisms working in perfect harmony. This wasn't just a recycling robot anymore. It was a testament to what could be built from broken things, from community, from dreams that refused to die. But as midnight approached and her family finally headed upstairs, Valentina faced her creation alone. She thought of the Tesla engineers who would be watching tomorrow, with their degrees from prestigious universities and years of corporate experience. Would they see past her lack of formal education? Would they understand that sometimes innovation comes from necessity rather than opportunity? Her phone buzzed again, a text from her father. "Your abuelo used to say, 'Los sueños no tienen precio, pero la dignidad no se vende.' Dreams have no price, but dignity is not for sale." Valentina squared her shoulders and began packing her tools. Tomorrow she would face Tesla not as a girl from the barrio with a homemade robot, but as an innovator who had built something meaningful from nothing but hope and determination. Dawn broke over Los Angeles as the Garcia family's old Ford pickup rumbled to life. Roberto sat in the driver's seat, his hands steady on the wheel for the first time in months. The truck bed carried their precious cargo. Esperanza, carefully wrapped in blankets Mrs. Rodriguez had insisted on providing to keep her warm. The normally 2-hour drive to Tesla's facility stretched endlessly. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every bump in the road made Valentina's heart jump. terrified that Esperanza might be damaged. She sat in the back seat wearing her new dress, her grandmother's earrings catching the morning light. Elena had spent an hour helping her daughter look professional, though her hands had trembled while pinning Valentina's hair. "Remember," Elena had whispered, "you carry our dreams, pero no nuestro peso." Our dreams, but not our burden. As they merged onto the freeway, Valentina's phone lit up with messages. Photos from Mrs. Rodriguez of lit candles at church. A good luck text from Mr. Kim. Even Jorge had sent a thumbs-up emoji. Her community was with her, even if they couldn't be there in person. Then she saw it. Tesla's gleaming headquarters rising from the landscape like something from another world. The building's modern architecture made their old pickup truck feel even more out of place. Security guards at the gate eyed them suspiciously, their gaze lingering on the battered vehicle. "ID and purpose of visit," one guard demanded. Valentina's hands shook as she presented her invitation letter. The guard's eyebrows rose slightly, his expression shifting from suspicion to something closer to curiosity. "You're the recycling robot girl." He studied her more carefully. "Parking for presentations is in Lot C. Engineering team will meet you at the loading dock." As they pulled into the designated spot, Valentina's breath caught in her throat. Other presenters were arriving too, but in sleek cars and corporate vehicles. She watched a team unload a robot that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie, all polished chrome and cutting-edge components. "Mija," Roberto's voice was soft but firm. "Your robot works. That's what matters." But as they began unloading Esperanza, disaster struck. The blankets caught on the truck's rusted bed and the robot tilted precariously. Valentina lunged forward, barely preventing a catastrophic fall, but she heard something inside Esperanza shift and crack. "No, no, no!" She quickly opened the access panel. The main stabilizer had come loose, the one Mr. Ortiz had helped her calibrate. Her hands trembled as she reached for her toolbox, aware of the curious stares from other presenters. 15 minutes until check-in, a Tesla employee announced, walking through the lot. Valentina's vision blurred with tears of frustration. All this way, all that help, all those dreams, only to fail in the parking lot? Then her father's work-worn hands appeared beside hers. "Together," he said simply. Roberto's fingers, though stiffened by injury, remembered their strength. He held the components steady while Valentina reconnected them, their teamwork wordless and efficient. 10 minutes. The stabilizer was fixed, but now Esperanza's diagnostic lights were flashing red. The impact had corrupted some of the sorting protocols, the very ones she needed to impress Tesla. 5 minutes. Valentina closed her eyes, hearing Mr. Ortiz's voice in her head. Sometimes the right way isn't the only way. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the cracked screen as she rewrote code segments on the spot. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't perfect, but it might just work. Time to move inside. As they wheeled Esperanza toward the entrance, Valentina caught her reflection in the building's tinted windows. She saw her mother's determination in her stance, her father's resilience in her eyes, her grandmother's heritage in her earrings. Behind her, the old pickup truck stood proudly among luxury vehicles, just as out of place as she felt, but just as deserving to be there. Inside, the presentation area hummed with activity. Engineers in Tesla uniforms moved purposefully between displays. Valentina heard fragments of conversations about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and neural networks, terms she'd learned from free online courses and borrowed textbooks. Then she heard the whispers. "Is that the community college project? I heard she built it in a garage. No formal training at all. Wonder who she knows to get a slot here." The moment Elon Musk entered the presentation area, the whispers died. He moved quickly between displays, his questions direct and probing. Valentina's heart hammered as he approached her station, her grandmother's earrings warm against her neck. "Show me," he said simply. Valentina took a deep breath, channeling every lesson, every sacrifice, every moment that had led to this. Esperanza doesn't just sort recyclables, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She learns from her mistakes, adapts to new materials, and identifies potentially harmful substances, like the industrial chemicals that injured my father and countless other workers. She activated Esperanza, and the robot came to life. Despite the earlier damage, despite the last-minute repairs, her creation performed flawlessly. The sorting arm moved with deliberate precision, categorizing materials faster than human eyes could follow. When Valentina introduced a container marked with hazard symbols, Esperanza immediately flagged it and initiated containment protocols. "The code," Musk said, studying the robot's movements. "It's unconventional." "Because I learned it unconventionally," Valentina replied, thinking of library computers and borrowed textbooks. Sometimes the most innovative solutions come from having no choice but to be innovative. A slight smile crossed Musk's face. He gestured to one of his engineers, who handed him a small bottle. "Try this," he said, placing it before Esperanza. The robot scanned it, paused, then categorized it correctly, identifying a chemical compound similar to the one that had injured her father. The Tesla engineers murmured appreciatively. "You built this in a garage?" Musk asked. "With help," Valentina answered, thinking of her community. "Sometimes the greatest resources aren't in labs or universities, but in the people who believe in you." Musk studied her for a long moment. "We don't just need engineers at Tesla," he said finally. "We need problem solvers, people who see solutions where others see scrap. Welcome to the team, Valentina." Through her tears of joy, Valentina saw her parents embracing by the door. She saw her past, the struggles, the doubts, the late nights, and her future bright with possibility. But most importantly, she saw herself, a girl from the barrio who had dared to dream and whose dreams had finally taken flight. As reporters gathered and cameras flashed, Valentina touched her grandmother's earrings and whispered, "Gracias, Esperanza." She wasn't just thanking her robot or her grandmother, but every person who had helped her reach this moment, proving that sometimes the most powerful technology isn't built with circuits and code, but with community, courage, and unconquerable hope. Sometimes the greatest innovations come from those with the least resources but the most heart. Your circumstances may shape your path, but they don't define your destination. Remember Valentina's words, "Dreams have no price." If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their dreams matter. Subscribe for more stories of extraordinary dreamers who prove that with determination and community support, anything is possible.